Okay, welcome back to another Between the Pages book chat. And today our guest is Sidney Williams, who's a thriller author, and we're here to talk about his book, Fool's Run. And I'm going to turn it over to him and let him introduce himself. So take it away.
Hi. Well, I'm Sidney Williams, as was mentioned, and I am kind of a long-time writer. I began writing and having my work published in the late '80s, if you can believe that. And Fool's Run is the latest book, and it's the first in a new series, and a little bit of a departure for me. I've always written thrillers of one ilk or another, but did quite a few horror thrillers early on, and some young adult horror under the name Michael August, and written short stories, comics, and different things through the years, and still plugging. And I teach creative writing as well, and have a lot of fun with that. And so, all in all, that fills up my time.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about the book and the series if you want. What's it about?
Fool's Run is the story of a guy named Silas Reardon, or Cy Reardon, and he was a cop in New Orleans, but he unfortunately accompanied his partner in sort of a retaliatory situation that went bad, and his partner wound up getting killed, and he did time. And so when the book begins, he has done a few years in jail, but has gotten out, and nobody wants to hire him. He's thinking maybe, he's qualified for security work, but his old friends who are retired police officers and have successful security firms don't want anything to do with a guy that's been in prison. So he's approached by this lawyer who is from a upscale firm, but she is a special counsel in many ways. She kind of has questionable clients and engineers a case for Cy involving a couple whose young daughters were murdered by a shady businessman who has actually been a criminal, but he is moving into more respectable territory. And they would like Cy to do something about him. And that proves to be the tip of the iceberg. Cy reluctantly, because he has a daughter of his own to think about, takes on the possible assassination of this guy. And in the course of kind of figuring out how he might do that, finds out there's much more going on and much more that he needs to address. And he winds up pulling several people together to help him, including a couple of brothers that are the nephews of a guy he knew in lockup. And he winds up relying on them more than he expected to. They are they are fishing guides, and they also know how to get things that you might need if you're running a dark operation, a dark op. And so winds up forming a little band that help him in his operation. And Publishers Weekly called it, I think rightly so, a thriller come caper. And so that's the setup for everything, and it gets wild from there for Cy. And hopefully it's a rousing time. A lot of the reviews have said, it's a page turner. So I'm always happy to hear that it's connecting with people, of course.
Okay, so what were your inspirations for writing this particular book?
Well, I had always been. I'm going to see my cat's tail pass in here.
Wouldn't be a live broadcast without a cat. So.
Yeah, without a cat, and if I close the door and lock her out, she complains. So we have a quandary there. Um, I had always, from my very earliest reading days, had been interested in the detective story. And when I was a kid, in the wake of Chinatown, I didn't see Chinatown when I was a kid, but in the wake of that, a lot of detective movies got made, and things like Farewell, My Lovely with Robert Mitchum came out, and The Drowning Pool with Paul Newman as Lou Archer, although they renamed him Lou Harper in the movies. those came out in the theater, and they were little. I was a little too young to see those. Farewell My Lovely definitely R-rated, but the tie-in movie editions came out, and so I said, "Oh, that's at the movies," and I picked those up and I started figuring out, oh, there's these guys and these writers, and they have their series characters, and so I got interested in that, and I discovered Ellery Queen's Mystery Magazine, and discovered Dashiell Hammett peripherally to Raymond Chandler and Ross McDonald and John D. McDonald along the way. So I was a big fan of all of those as a kid. And early in my writing life, I was going to write private eye stories. And I wrote when I was out of college and first working as a newspaper reporter and covering the crime beat. That's where I, learned a lot of stuff. I would cover the crime beat at night. I was not the police reporter. I was a general assignment reporter. But when I was first out of college and going, okay, I'm not going to give up writing just because I have a newspaper job. I would write, and I wrote my trunk novels were private eye novels. But as I wrote those, I thought, I'm not doing anything that hasn't been done with this. And I sort of realized that I liked horror and things like that. And so the first book that I wrote and sold was a horror novel with mystery elements called Azarias. And so I, went away from mystery and detective writing for a long time because, I was doing different things. And I got to write some fun books. I got to write some books under contract and things like that for Pinnacle Books, which is part of the Kensington publishing company. But over the years, I've aged. I've learned more about the world. I was a reporter for many years, and I've been other things. I kind of wanted to come back to the detective novel. And by then, I realized, there are a million directions to take the detective novel. And along the way, I had read things like Red Harvest by Dashiell Hammett, featuring his Continental Op detective. And, the op in Red Harvest is not really out to settle a mystery. He is out to fix a problem. And that's kind of, even though I had always loved Chandler and Ross McDonald in particular, I realized that, there were possibilities for a detective character who was not necessarily out to put a puzzle together, but to fix something. And that's what Cy winds up doing in the kind of the dark side of New Orleans, which is where he's a cop, was a cop. And all of those things and all of my reading and all of my experiences just came together to kind of strike out in a new direction. And I plan to keep working with Cy for at least 3 books, and I'm working on the second one now, which will be a little bit more of a puzzle mystery, although he finds himself once again in, deep waters and things. So he's fun to work with.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine. That was a favorite of mine too when I was a kid. That's a great magazine. So tell us a little bit about the main character. What's Cy like?
Cy is a guy who probably should never have been a policeman. He he's a sensitive guy to a degree. He is, he's toughened by his job, and can take on a lot, and does wind up taking on a lot of dangerous stuff. There are 2 main action sequences in the book. One prior to the middle, and then the whole ending is a hopefully nail biting action sequence for him. But he is a sensitive man. He has a sensitive side, and he is a guy that will look at the broader picture and not just be black and white about any issue. And Cy is also now well read. Where Cy served time in Louisiana, where you would serve time if you were a law enforcement officer, and could not be put in Angola, the really the main prison in Louisiana. You served time at a North Louisiana institution called David Wade Correctional, and so while he was there, he read a lot. He took correspondence courses, and is quite multidimensional in his thinking, which allows him to kind of think on his feet and things like that. And he is a tough guy, but he's got a heart, and of course he has a daughter that he's estranged from that he cares about. So hopefully he comes across as a multidimensional guy, and a guy that is open to possibilities, open to different types of people. He's not closed-minded about people. And I once upon a time. They interviewed, or I guess, I think it was in an interview that Ross MacDonald spoke of Lou Archer, his detective character, and he said, "I am not Archer, but Archer is me." And he was not as tough a guy as Archer was, or whatever, in the same way. And I certainly have never served as a policeman. I worked the police beat, and at times clashed with police officers because reporters and police officers have different goals at times. But I think it's kind of the same thing. I am not Cy Reardon, clearly, seriously and definitely, but there is some of me in him, some of my worldview or whatever. And I feel like my worldview is a lot more shaped than it was when I was younger. And so hopefully he comes across as a multidimensional guy and a thoughtful guy, but also a guy that can rise to an occasion and provide some excitement for readers when he finds he's up against a lot of dangerous people in a very dangerous place.
Okay, so what was the hardest scene or type of scene that you wrote in the book?
The hardest, certainly a lot of it required a lot of research. I don't know if it was hard, but I try to make exciting final acts in my books. And certainly there was a lot of research involved in putting the final act together. He finds himself in a place where very isolated place right at the edge of New Orleans, where a lot of bad guys can kind of be around him without attracting notice. And I don't want to spoil too much, but he finds himself. It's amazing, a Minotaur situation, and of course I had to get him there. And there's a lot of craziness getting to that situation. He's helped by the McCluskeys, the brothers, but they wind up in a bit of a chase to try to get away once they've kind of accomplished part of their goal. They wind up in this dangerous, or Cy winds up in this dangerous place and has to deal with dangerous guys. They had to realistically get him there and devise, the ways that he would find himself in this situation. And it was fun. And happily, when you have, the problems of getting somebody where they need to be, getting them there becomes a fun thing too. And so we wind up with some boat chases and some things like that along the way. And so that was, required the most logistical thinking and careful thought about what is where and how to get from point A to point B in a realistic way. And other than that, it took me a while to write it. I kind of figure, even though I have an outline, I kind of figure things out in a first draft. And I had a writers group, kind of a strong writers group. I was living in Orlando when I wrote most of this book. And had a pretty strong writers group, and so they were reading chapters as they came out of the printer and things like that. And so it was a fun process, but it took me a while to tie it all together and make it work. And I even moved some things around in the second draft.
Yeah, that always happens.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so what was your favorite scene or type of scene that you wrote in the book?
There is a scene that involves a big twist in about the first third of the book, and Cy is basically, I kind of have not talked about it in a lot of interviews, but he is trying to plan a hit in the beginning of the beginning of the story. And in the course of planning a hit, there is a big surprise, and that sets up a big situation where he has to escape a situation. And that's set in a club in New Orleans, a big crowded, people to people club. All this, of course, is a story that's pre-COVID. The first book and the second book with Cy are going to be pre-COVID, and the third probably will occur during lockdown. But it was already written before everything happened. So it's a very crowded club with throbbing music and people, and of course, Cy finds himself in this club where it's not easy to move, and people wanting to get him, and then in a parking garage in the middle of New Orleans and everything, trying to survive. And so that was a lot of fun to write. And as I was writing it, I'm going, is this going to be interesting? I took it to my writing group, and they go, this is cinematic. We really like this. And so, it was certainly energizing to write, and it's certainly fun to write adrenaline pounding scenes where the hero is not sure how he's going to get out of a situation and everything. So certainly a lot of fun with that, a lot of fun too with that challenging final scene. That was also a lot of fun too. And I honed that one quite a bit. I wrote it, and I had a couple of endings. And actually, in the very final twist of how he survives, I've done this back when I was early on writing detective stories. A lot of times I find that you drop a little something in, and you don't know that it has a meaning, but then you realize, this connects. And so something I had put in almost incidentally for comedy with the McCluskeys, because the McCluskeys are, when we start out with the McCluskeys, they're the guys with the long beards, and they live in the swamps, and they take guys hunting, and they have like a training facility for hunters that want to play Army a bit too, and things like that. Just to make the McCluskeys, kind of set the tone for the McCluskeys, I had an element, and then I go, oh no, that's going to matter. And it comes back around. And so when things like that click, it's always a joy.
So tell us a little bit about the supporting characters. What are their personalities like?
Well, the McCluskeys, and it emerged. And I'm a lifelong Louisiana resident, or not lifelong, obviously, but I lived in Louisiana for many years, in central Louisiana, and lived in Texas for a number of years, worked in Texas in corporate marketing for a number of years, and then moved to Orlando. But I certainly, grew up with many Louisiana people, and grew up with a lot of the trappings of Louisiana, like the New Orleans Saints, who, happily, it was a joy a few years ago when they won the Super Bowl, that they even got to the Super Bowl was something that, you dreamed of for years. But Archie Manning, of course, was a big Saints player for many years. And then Kenny Stabler was a player for, he was a big hope, Kenny the Snake Stabler. And I guess maybe it was just in the back of my mind, but my Cy knew a guy in jail, and he has these nephews, the McCluskeys, who are not quite as bad as their criminal uncle, who was in David Wade under protective custody because he had finally turned state's evidence on some things to get a little easier life for himself. But and he's sort of a voice of wisdom for Cy, who is not a policeman any longer, and he occasionally turns back to him. But his nephews are sort of, again, guys with long hair, guys with long beards when we start, although they clean up pretty good. And Kenny is very childlike. He's intelligent, and he's fine, but he's very childlike. He's lived with his brother most of his life, except when his brother was in the military. And but anyway, with all that, they're Archie and Kenny, and I realized, and my friend said, clearly their dad was a Saints fan. And so, that was a great little tie-in for Arch and Kenny. and they were, going to be just supporting characters. And I realized Arch, had served in the military, been in the Middle East and everything, and so has a lot of intellect in his own way. And Kenny is almost, I don't want to categorize Kenny or diagnose Kenny, but he is very capable, and he is, can be almost on autopilot with his being capable. And so that really kicks in. And then Kenny can also be uh, a loose cannon, and we have a moment where they're kind of like trying to monitor one of the bad guys in a restaurant with phones and everything, and not call attention to themselves. And Kenny, they needed Kenny in there, clean cut and in a suit and everything, but they need Kenny to just behave. He goes, "Wait, I can get a better shot, guys." It's like, Kenny, don't call attention to yourself. So that's Kenny. And then this is we're talking about a lot about the comedy side of things, but this is a very dark, noirish book as well. And Cy, right out of prison, is despondent and depressed and estranged from his daughter because his wife wants nothing to do with him, wants his ex-wife, and wants nothing, his daughter to have nothing to do with him, and may be in a relationship that's dangerous. And so that's, a concern that is what makes him take on, a dark job. But he initially seeks companionship with a girl from the French Quarter who can provide a girlfriend experience. And he winds up just drinking a lot and getting into a stupor and having to be kind of rescued from that. She takes his wallet and everything, but also calls for help for him with a card. And she, of course, because of her background, her name is Crystal, and she's not a hooker with a heart of gold, but she is, has acting capabilities. And so she is a great actress, and can slip into roles as needed. And as I mentioned, the Publishers Weekly said, well, this is a thriller come caper. It is, and they wind up setting up a bit of a con game and using Crystal's abilities to assume different personalities, while the McCluskeys, are kind of in the background ready to help. And Arch, as I mentioned, Arch, when he's shaved and everything and with a military background, can help Cy pose as a FBI agent or Securities and Exchange Commission agent, things like that. So all the characters are, uniquely suited to Cy's needs, happily, and Cy certainly sees how he can use these people. And he has a computer expert who is gender neutral, and that's something that, he was in prison, so he knows about this kind of thing, but it's new to him in the day-to-day world. And so JL is his computer expert, is somebody he has to learn to relate to, and be respectful of, and understanding of. And it's something new for him, as a guy who was a cop and was out of circulation for a number of years. Hopefully quite a colorful surrounding cast, and keeps it interesting, and it makes it more than Cy the loner. Cy is a loner to some degree, and we see this story through Cy's narration. And a lot of people have said they like and they enjoy Cy's philosophizing, and there's a bit of that because he spent so much time with books and thinking about the world and his own life, because he screwed up badly and was isolated for a long time. But we see all that, we see everything through Cy's eyes and through Cy's voice. And hopefully it winds up being a very colorful, if dark, tale.
Yeah. Well, I think in the noir is dark by nature, I think, a little bit. But it sounds like you've made it a nice, well-rounded dark. So
Hopefully so, and hopefully it still delivers noir elements, and certainly a guy that is out of prison and initially thinks he's going to be taking on a hit job. It's pretty noirish, but we lighten it up a bit at times, and still, again built to a pulse pounding conclusion where he's really at odds with some dangerous people.
okay, so you obviously write thrillers, and you said you've written some horror as well. Are there any other genres that you'd like to try?
I have dipped my toe. I actually dipped my toe a bit into paranormal romance recently with a novelette in a collection called Love Among the Thorns. And that's part of a big promotion that's going on. It's from Camden Park Press. And so Camden Park's part of a couple of big promotions going right now. But I was always interested in the Gothic. Sometimes you see them called the women running from houses Gothics or tales, and that peaked before I was a professional writer. And I always thought, wow, that would have been fun for me to do, and to have like a different pen name and everything back when people, did those things and, had different contracts and everything. I always wanted to write one of those, and Camden Park Press announced the Love Among the Thorns collection, which was Gothic, paranormal romance, and whatever. And I had a couple of years ago, I toured Scotland, and so I wrote a story called Strake Hall for that collection, and it's a Gothic set in a Scottish castle. An American archivist is called on to go to this Scottish castle and winds up unlocking secrets and having ghostly experiences. So that was a joy to work in that sandbox. And I wrote a post-apocalyptic story for Camden Park's collection, Cat Ladies of the Apocalypse. And when
Well, that
that
sounds interesting.
yeah, when that title was announced, I'm going, I gotta write something for that. And my friend is a guy named Simone Karate, who is a science fiction critic. He wrote a book about Ian Banks, and he wrote a study of the generation Starship. And his wife is a NASA scientist, literally. She is a botanist for NASA. And if you ever see him like growing lettuce on the space station or whatever, that's her lettuce. Well, I called her up. I said, I'm thinking about, told him, and we wound up talking about a botanist in a post-apocalyptic city trying to kind of get agriculture going and get something sustainable again. And we talked about things like using abandoned skyscrapers, and creating gardens in there, and the challenges that are faced. And some of the challenges there are the same that you would have in space, where you want to use space, your space as well as possible. So, they try to do vertical things. Anyway, that, kind of was the basis for this botanist who is still alive in a post-apocalyptic society, and is also trying to preserve culture and face cultists from as you would expect in a post-apocalyptic world. So got to write a great story. It's called The Witch of Washington Park, and it's set in Portland, and uses a lot of Portland locations. I studied at Goddard College's Seattle location, or it's out on the Olympic Peninsula, actually. And had friends from Portland and all that, and visited Portland during the time I was up there and all that, and so it was a great chance to imagine a post-apocalyptic Portland, and use some cats, because as we saw earlier, I have a cat, and my heroine winds up with two cats and a little boy before the story's over. So happily, right now, I am getting to do things in genres I've always been interested in. Fool's Run, as I've been talking about, has a bit of Slavic magic kind of peripheral to things. So there's always a little weirdness going on in my stuff, and I saying speculative fiction sounds maybe can sound pretentious, and I don't mean it to, but I kind of think of myself as under the speculative umbrella because that's a little science fiction, a little horror, a little fantasy, and I'm interested in all of those realms. My friend Simone, who I'm talking about, calls it non-mimetic fiction, or not. It's not realism, and so exploring tributaries in that realm, I certainly enjoy. I like the short story, and I write short stories as I can. And I was a big fan of Charles L. Grant, the quiet horror writer, and I've written a couple of quiet horror short stories, and I'm really interested in, that type of horror where it really, is messing with your mind a little bit, and just planting the chill along the spine versus the slasher stuff. Although I did do a book called Dark Hours, which is kind of neo slasher in that realm.
Okay, I think we'll wrap it up here for today
Cool.
then, and I'll let you tell everyone where they can find you and your books.
Well, my home base is my website still, sidisalive.com, SIDISALIV.com, ALIVE.com. My friend actually saw that as graffiti once upon a time ago. That's got to be my domain. So sidisalive.com will branch off to all of my presences. And I'm Sidney Williams in most places. Sometimes I'm Sidney_Williams. I'm on Twitter. I'm actually on Facebook as Sid is Alive now, Sid is Alive Books, because Facebook finally let me rename my Facebook author page to that the other day. So if you look for Sidney Williams, Sid is Alive author, that'll find me. And I've got an Instagram, I've got Twitter, Facebook, the fun places.
Great. So thank you for being here today. You were a wonderful guest. I enjoyed listening to you talk about your book.
Thank you. And thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And please join us next weekend when we have another Between the Pages book chat. So bye for now.